Okay, hi. Hi. Oh, okay. Hi. Okay, hi. So I'm peer ranking all of my 16 big number books that I read this year, and I guess I'll talk to you a little bit about them. Oh, I guess I should explain. Top of the list is Will Read Again. I gotta bring up, hold on, I'm all over the place. Give me a second. To also like tell you what I actually rated these books out of 10. Hold on. Okay, cool. Or out of 5, out of 10. Who rates books out of 10? I won't be able to tell you what I rated the books. Hold on, let me shut up. The reason why I'm here is so that I can tell you exactly what I rated these books. Because I don't remember what I was talking about. Okay, essentially here's how it's going. I'm so scared that my camera's gonna stop recording. I'm sorry, I have to chat. Okay, hello. Hi. Welcome. It's 2025, which is insane. And anyway, I'm sick. Sorry about that. I wanted to do a 2024 reading wrap-up video, but I didn't really know how I wanted to do it. So I thought it would be easy. I can stay in my bed. I don't have to grab a bunch of books. I'm gonna do a tier ranking every book that I read in 2025. I read 16 books last year. My goal was 15. I gave all of my books a star rating out of 5, as most people do. But I realized that that star rating doesn't necessarily like correspond to like my general vibes about a book. And I guess I'll explain more about that later. But we're gonna do a tier ranking video. So our top tier is gonna be Will Read Again. So these are books that I thought were fantastic and I definitely will be reading them again. I'm not a big rereader person, so if someone's like, I'm gonna read this again, that's high praise from me. Then it's 10 out of 10 would recommend. This is a great book. I could put a book in this that didn't get 5 stars, okay? It's a 10 out of 10 would recommend, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a 5-star book. I don't know. My mind is weird. But it's like, I would tell a friend to read this and I would stand by that choice. Then the next tier is She's Cute, She's Fun. This is for books that are like, yeah, I had a good time reading it. It's not like a favorite. I might not tell you, oh yeah, you should read this, but it was a good time and I liked it. Then it was a book. So this is for books that it's like, I didn't hate my time reading it, but I maybe didn't like super love reading it either. So it was a book. And then it's gonna be Struggle Bus. These are books that I was, kind of trudging through, wasn't having a fun time, the vibes were off, not what I thought I was gonna get. And then the last tier is I Should Have DNF'd. I don't like to not finish books, and DNF to me is like, I can't read this, I'm putting it down. There are a couple books that I technically DNF'd, but it's not like because I thought they were bad and I didn't want to read them. It's more so that like I didn't feel like finishing them at that time, or I like read a few chapters and I was like, this isn't the vibe I'm in right now, if that makes sense. And so I didn't really count it as like a DNF on my Goodreads or Storygraph or anything. But okay, that's the spiel. We're gonna go in chronological order. We're gonna go in chronological order. So let's go to the first book. The first book I read this year was Before the Devil Knows You're Here. I wish I had the book with me, but I'm too lazy. I'm cozy. I'm in bed. So I'm not gonna get up and do that. Sorry. But I guess I could show you the picture. I don't know. Whatever. I might put it here. This is the book. Okay? Before the Devil Knows You're Here. This book, I really just bought it because it has a beautiful cover. It's not only a beautiful, like, the art on the front of the book, which you can see because I'm hopefully showing it for you right here-ish, but also under the cover, under the jacket, stunning. It's a beautiful book to look at, and that's why I bought it. Before the Devil Knows You're Here is a young adult fantasy. It's sort of historical fiction at the same time. It takes place in the 1800s. It's about a young girl her father gets killed by this folklore cryptid creature called the Man of Sap, and then her brother is kidnapped by the same folklore cryptid guy. So she goes on this adventure through the forest to try to rescue her brother, and we get sort of these flashes between her story and a storyline that takes place maybe like 60 or so years before hers, about a young man who wants to build an apple orchard. It takes place in the US, it's sort of in the Midwest, and it's very much based on like American folklore. There's some allusion to like Native American type stuff, I think, if I remember correctly, and also like Mexican folklore and history as well, because the main character, I can't remember her name. I'm doing such a bad job, but the main character, she's biracial. She's half Mexican, half American, Caucasian. I said that pointing to my hand. I guess I'm also half Caucasian. But anyway, yeah, she's half Mexican, half Caucasian. That was something that actually really drew me to the story as well, just having a biracial main character and that being like a part of the story. It's based in this American folklore, and it's about Johnny Appleseed and the guy with the axe. You know who I'm talking about? What's his name? Hold on. American folklore guy with axe. Paul Bunyan. But yeah, it's a really interesting blend of different historical cryptids and folklore creatures, and it feels very much like a fairy tale at different points. It was interesting, it was fun, I enjoyed reading it. I think I gave it a 3.5 stars. I think for me at times it felt a little bit slow. There was action in almost every chapter, I want to say, but it was very much like the way in fairy tales where like the character will just sort of come across a random trial that doesn't feel super connected to like their character arc. It was like plot for the sake of plot, less than like plot being motivated by character. At least that's the way I felt when I was reading it. And that's how I'm recalling it now. And I'm not entirely sure if that's all accurate, but that's how I felt about it. So I will say that this book goes in she cute, she fun, because that's where she feels like she belongs. The next book I read, because we gotta move this along, White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So, okay, this man, he be writing Russian literature, okay? Like, this was a short book. This was 80 pages. I read it on my iPad because I just got it from the library. Hey, if you have a library card and you have a cell phone or an iPad of sorts, a Kindle maybe even, I don't know, I don't have one of those, but you can get an app called Libby, I think, and also maybe Hoopla, and there are books there. You just put in your library card and you can get books. So like, a lot of you be buying books all the time and you don't need to do that. But anyway, yeah, I read this through my library. Thank you, library system. I read it during the Super Bowl because I was like, I could not care less. It's kind of a tale of a sad, awkward, shy loser man living in St. Petersburg, Russia, and he's lonely and he meets a random lonely lady one night while out on a walk, and he kind of instantly falls in love with her because they bond over their shared loneliness. And it's very romantic in the way that it's written. I wouldn't necessarily call it a romance, but I won't elaborate too much on the story because I don't want to like spoil things for you. So yeah, it's just about two lonely people who meet and they continue to meet up in the evenings and go for walks and talk about their loneliness. And it's, you know, floral in the writing and it's Russian, and yeah, if you're looking for a classic, I would say like it's a fun classic. It's short, it's relatively easy to get through, but there are still times where it's Russian literature. I will say that she's also cute and fun. I don't think it was a book, you know, like it wasn't like, oh, it's a book. But I also don't think like I would recommend it necessarily. I mean, if you want a classic, I would recommend it, but it's not what I'm going to when I'm talking about recommending books. Next book was The Battle of the Labyrinth, book number 4 in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I gave that 4 stars because it was a fun time, and I will say my goal for the year, one of my reading goals for the year, was to finish the Percy Jackson series, and that did not happen. Maybe it's because I don't want the story to end, or maybe it's because it just is middle grade and I haven't been in a super middle grade mood lately. I didn't really like want to read the 5th book, and I started the 5th book like 5 times probably throughout the year. I think I started it right after this, and then I started it like multiple times whenever. And I just could not get myself to read past chapter like 2. Again, I wouldn't call that a DNF. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm not gonna read this. I am going to read it. I just I couldn't be bothered to do it at the time. It just was never the right mood. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. But yeah, Percy and his friends go into the labyrinth. They meet new characters from Greek mythology, and it's the whole thing. If you know what Percy Jackson is, you know what it is. I thought it was fun. I had a good time with it. I would say 10 out of 10 recommend just for the whole Percy Jackson series. So that's where that's going there. Then my next book, okay, y'all, this is controversial. My next book, Man Enough by Justin Baldoni. There's drama. I don't know. There's all sorts of Justin Baldoni drama happening right now, and I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say about it, really, because there's a lot of back and forth from both sides, and I haven't read either of the things that are out yet. It seems that there's drama and both parties could be nefarious, and that's all I'll say on that. But I will talk about this book because I gave it 5 stars. It was great. Man Enough is Justin Baldoni's, I guess, kind of like a memoir, or I would say it's kind of like his thesis statement on life is what it seems to be. It's not really about, he doesn't like the phrase toxic masculinity, which you can take from that what you will, but basically he's talking about how does he take the good parts of traditional masculinity and leave the like negative and harmful stuff. And he talks about his experience as a man growing up in the US and how patriarchy has like affected his life. He talks about the way that men deal with money, body image issues. He talks about sexuality, his own experience with sexual assault, stuff like that. I listened to the audiobook on Spotify. Another thing that y'all should be doing, listen to audiobooks on Spotify. He's the narrator on Spotify, and I felt that he was very genuine and heartfelt, and I would recommend it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought that he was very insightful, and I also thought it was interesting to hear about feminism and the way that patriarchy affects men from a man's point of view, because I don't think that we hear that a lot. We don't hear a lot of men that are like trying to be allies to women talking about their experience with masculinity, and that's why I enjoyed it. And I don't know about the drama. I'm so sorry. I wish I could speak to that, but I can't. I would say 10 out of 10 would recommend. Controversial, I know. Okay, the next book I read was Mountains Made of Glass. I'll put that right here for you to see. Just like a fantasy romance. It's a romantasy, you know, it's a little heavier on the romance, a little lighter on the fantasy, and I just thought, you know, maybe this is what I'm into right now and I'll give it a shot. I've never read like just a straight up romantasy before, and I thought I would give it a shot. it delivered on the romance and the spice. You know, that's kind of what you pick up a Scarlett St. Clair for. Yeah, it definitely delivered on that. I will say, I'm putting her in struggle bus because, guys, the first like 2-3 chapters were riddled with like typos. And I was like, this is a traditionally published book. Why are there typos in here? It was so many typos, so many typos. And also just like kind of like not the best writing in the very beginning. And I think that that's probably because the beginning was like setting up the story and trying to get us to like get to the spice and the romance and everything. And so I think that, you know, they probably just didn't care about it. But yeah, the beginning was full of typos, full of bad-ish writing, and I just could not stand it. It was so annoying to me to read. I will say, once you get to the romance and that's what you're here for, you know, it was fun. It was a fun time, but it was a struggle bus in the beginning. So I gave it 3.5 stars because it delivered on what it wanted us to like get out of it. But yeah, it was not that fun. Oh, a spiel. Let me give you the spiel about the book. Mountains Made of Glass. It says it's not a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It says it's like a retelling of a different fairy tale. It's really just Beauty and the Beast. At the end of the day, like there's other elements. I'm sure there's something to do with the mountains that honestly had nothing to do with the plot. I'm sure that's part of the original fairy tale, and also this like 7 days thing. She has 7 days to fall in love with the monster evil elf prince. I'm sure that was in the original fairy tale too, but it's really Beauty and the Beast, and I feel like she could have said that and people would have got what she meant. This girl kills a frog or something, and then other elf princes are like, you killed our brother, now you have to go live with our other brother who's evil, and you have 7 days to fall in love with him and discover his true name, or else you're cursed to live there forever, or something like that. So it's enemies to lovers, kind of. They don't like each other. She's, you know, wanting to escape. And then, you know, I guess at the end they're in love. I guess. I wouldn't call that in love, but they like each other enough. And that's the story. Sorry I spoiled it for you, but also, like, it's a romantasy. They had sex. That's what it's about. 3.5 stars because it did what it said it was gonna do. Struggle bus because of all those typos. The next book I read, right here, was the audiobook of Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is a memoir. It's really just kind of Dolly talking about her life from sort of like early childhood to present day. It's about love, but not necessarily like romantic love as much as it focuses a lot on her female friendships, and she has relationships throughout the book. They're not necessarily the key focus. I thought it was very interesting because she's not a super relatable character, I think, to most people. She spends a lot of time partying and being wild, like truly wild, like going home with like 50-year-old men in her 20s and skipping work to go party and stuff like that. Like, she seems to have a very privileged sort of lifestyle, going on trips to like New York with no money and just spending the night at someone's penthouse type stuff. Like, but yeah, it's a wild story of her life, but a lot of it focuses on how she navigates her early adulthood and her friendships and losing those friendships and grief and what it's like to be the single person in your friend group and things like that. I thought it was very relatable in the sense that even though the events of her life are a bit fantastical and wild to probably a lot of people, she also deals with the same feelings that we all deal with, and she's a great writer. I think that the way she told the story was really well done, and it feels like you're talking to a friend or reading out of someone's diary. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I would say 10 out of 10 would recommend. I think it's great. If you have the audiobook, I like audiobooks for like memoirs and stuff because it's kind of like listening to a podcast, like if you're commuting somewhere. I gave it 4 stars, but I will say 10 out of 10 would recommend if you are looking for an audiobook to read. I don't love audiobooks that are fiction, and that will come into play later, but I do like an audiobook memoir, especially if the narrator is also the person who wrote the book. The next book I read was The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and you guys, this is the third book in the Inheritance Games series, and I loved the Inheritance Games. I liked the second book, which I can't remember what it's called now, but this third book made me want to rip out my hair. I have never hated a book quite so much. And the worst thing is even though I hated it, I gave it 2.5 stars. Even though I hated it so much, I can't really put it in I should have DNF'd because it's the third book in a trilogy. Like, obviously, I made it past the second book. I'm not just gonna stop reading. So I had to know how it ended. I'm putting it in struggle bus because that's how I feel about it. It was horrible. I think she was probably really rushed to get through it. The back and forth that Avery does with the 2 main romantic leads in this book series is just like, I was over it by book 2, and the fact that it continued into book 3 was so annoying. And then also there's like a random new character in the third book who is just useless and pointless. And then also there is this random flashback scene, and this is what I really hated the book for. There's this random flashback scene that keeps on getting referenced throughout the entire book. And it made me feel like I had an aneurysm or something, because I was like, did I forget? Like, I was like, am I having a stroke? Did I forget that there was this scene? But no, that scene wasn't in either of the first 2 books. It just happened in between book 2 and book 3, apparently. And we're getting the flashback of it, but we're never getting the full scene, and they're acting like it's majorly important to like the story arc, but it wasn't. I'm so sorry, but like literally, it was so pointless. This flashback thing, if the flashback whole thing hadn't been a part of the book, I probably would have given it like 3.5 stars. But that flashback thing made me so mad. So yeah, struggle bus, verging on should have DNF'd. And that's how I feel about that. My next book, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This got a lot of chatter when it first came out because of the title. It's a very controversial kind of title. Jennette McCurdy's memoir. She kind of just goes through her life story, talking about how she got started as a child star, the way that her mom really encouraged it and was definitely like living sort of vicariously through her, and then talking about just really the abuse that she experienced at her mom's hands. I listened to the audiobook again. She's the narrator of the audiobook, and I think that she's very funny. It was very funny, even though it dealt with some really like heavy topics, but also she's a great writer. Like, the way that the story was told was just really touching. It has this punchy title, but when you really like listen to her story and hear the way that she talks about her mom, she loves her mom, you know, but it's about like this grief of having lost a parent, but also realizing that like the way that that parent treated her was abusive. And I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was interesting just her life in general, but also the way that she deals with her grief and the struggles that she dealt with throughout her life. I'm putting that one also in 10 out of 10 would recommend. It was a good book. If you need an audiobook, listen to it. I gave it 5 stars. I was really like into the memoirs this year. Next book, right here, 5 Broken Blades. I picked this book up purely because of the cover, and actually my camera is sitting on the book right now, so I can't show you, but maybe I'll show you under the dust jacket right here, maybe. Otherwise, I'm just wiggling my fingers. It's kind of like a grown-up Six of Crows instead of a YA. It's a fantasy heist, and we've got actually 6 characters, even though it's 5 broken blades. There's a king that they're essentially trying to dethrone, but there's magic involved and just these interesting characters. Everyone's kind of paired up, which I didn't necessarily love, that it was like each person had like a romantic person with them, but it was okay. It was fun. It was so fun. It was a great time. I did guess the like big twist sort of around the like 60% mark, I think, but even like regardless of that, I had a great time. 5 broken blades, 10 out of 10, would recommend. Honestly, will read it again because I think it's gonna be a trilogy and I like to, you know, be caught up. The second book hasn't come out yet, so whenever that second book comes out, I will be reading it again. Okay, we're back to the controversy. This was my next book, okay? I had to do it. I had to read it because I wanted to know. I'm a curious person and I like to be informed before I like just say, yeah, I hate that. You know, I didn't want to be like jumping on the bandwagon of haters without being informed, okay? So I said, let me listen to the audiobook of It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover because I wanted to be informed. I wanted to know what it's about. I wanted to say, is it really that bad? Are we all just jumping on a bandwagon? Are we just being haters for real? So I said, let me read it. And I listened to the audiobook. And I will say, it's entirely possible that because I listened to the audiobook, and I'm not a fan of audiobook fiction, because I don't like the voices that people do for characters. I don't like when women do male voices in audiobooks because they like go really low and try to sound like a man. And I also don't like when men do female voices for audiobooks because then they're like up here and it's like girly. Like, I don't like that. Just do your normal voice or be good at doing voices. I think Stephen Fry is like the guy that does the Harry Potter audiobooks, and for the most part they're really good, but there are a couple voices for him too that I was like, stop. His Hagrid, I think. Well, okay, let me not say that. I don't want anyone Harry Potter fans coming after me. But I will say, I'm not a fan of audiobook fiction because I don't like the voices that they do for characters when they're reading dialogue. And that could have played a huge part in how I experienced this book. But I will say, I gave this book 2 stars. Flat out 2 stars. It was really, really bad. I think it's the lowest rated book. Yeah, my lowest rated book of the year. I hated it. I hated it. I did not enjoy any part of it. That's not true. I think that Colleen has some interesting, I think she has an interesting perspective on the topic of the book. Since a lot of it was drawn from her own experience, in a sense, having been the daughter of a mom who experienced domestic violence. Definitely she has like a perspective on it, and I think that that played into the way that she wrote this book. If she's writing it to be like a cautionary tale, there was some harmful stuff in that, and if she's writing it to be purely fiction, I think that she should have maybe kept out some of the way that she talks about things is very like prescriptive, is very like Colleen stepping through the book, through the fourth wall and trying to talk to you, the audience. And I think that if you're truly just trying to like have a fun narrative, maybe don't do that. That's very vague, but I will just say she has an opinion, it seems, within the story that the reason people are abusive is because they've been hurt in the past. And that's pretty much assumed to be by like professionals in those sorts of fields to be a false narrative, that's not true. And that's kind of the biggest problem that I had with the story, other than also the bad writing. At the very beginning, it tries to be super edgy in a way that was very cringy, very millennial core. And then also the romance was not romantic to me. It was very scary, but in a weird way that like Ryle's red flags at the beginning of the book are scary, but not red flags towards like abuse, more so red flags towards like stalker, which was weird to me that like he has all these red flags at the beginning that are meant to be seen as green flags. Like he's very passionate. He like finds out where she lives because she tells him the building she lives in on the first night they met, which is insane to me. And then he goes to that building and then he knocks on every single door until he finds her. And that's supposed to be like romantic. And it's not really framed as being a red flag, even though it is a red flag. But then once they're in a relationship, he really doesn't show any red flags of like being abusive until the event where he's abusive. It was like Colleen can't really imagine that people can have like both. Colleen wants him to be a romantic hero until he's an abuser. And she doesn't know how to like mesh those together, that like the abusive man can present as a romantic hero. It's like Ryle flips a switch. And in fact, that's the way that the narrative explains his abuse, is that Ryle flips a switch. And that was my biggest problem with the book. I will say, should have DNF'd, but I was just too curious. I did a whole TikTok series on my experience of reading that book. I did not enjoy it. 2 stars, should have DNF'd. Next, The 6 Deaths of the Saint. I feel like that's a tongue twister, by Alex E. Harrow. So that book is right here, and I had a great time with it. It was so fun. It's a very, very, very short story. I believe it's like 20 pages. I don't know. 29 pages. I read it on my Kindle, not my Kindle, my Kindle app on my iPad, because it's a Kindle Unlimited, I think, or maybe it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those. It's a short story written a part of like a collective of short stories, and without giving too much away, it's about a young woman who becomes a knight, and there's magic involved, but the magic is sort of peripheral to the whole story. It's romantic, it's adventurous. I read it on the plane in one sitting. It was a great story. I'm debating if I want to put it in 10 out of 10 would recommend or will read again, because I feel like I could read it again. Would I read it again? Yeah, I would. I'm gonna put it in will read again. I will read it again because I think that it's like a great short story, and I think just craft-wise, it was really well written. It made me emotional in 29 pages, and it told a complete story, and it made me like surprised, you know? Oh, and I gave that 4 stars. I don't remember why I give things the star ratings that I give them, because it's very much about how I feel in the moment, if that makes sense. So I gave it 4 stars, but I do feel that it was fantastic. I don't know. The next book that I read was When the Moon Hatched. I'm putting it right here. I picked it up because it's gorgeous. I have the book just out of frame, and so I will actually show you the physical copy. But When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. It's a beautiful book. It's a thick book, and it's got this gorgeous map right on the inside cover. It's got a content warning, which I think books maybe should do. I don't know. It's got a glossary of terms. It's got a list of animal or creatures and beings. It's got a list of characters. I love a fantasy book that goes into everything. Pronunciation guide. Like, it really, she goes into so much depth in creating this world, and I really appreciate that, and that's why I picked it up, because I think that, like, wow, like, you did all that for this? That's incredible. I love it. I love a really in-depth thing. I think that that's so fun, and that's why I picked it up. That being said, I gave it 3.25 stars because it was a book, and that's where it's going. It was just a book. I love all of the work that went into it. I will never, like, poo-poo on someone putting in that much work. I think it could have been shorter, if I'm being honest. It's enemies to lovers, kind of. I won't tell you what there is. There's a trope in there that I think is kind of a cop-out, but there's a trope in there that I didn't love. And also that I figured out really early on. I figured it out. It was just a book to me. There wasn't anything, there were creative things. The world building was interesting. But I guess maybe I didn't like the main character. She was very strong female character, girl boss coded, in the sense that, like, she's fighting people and she doesn't have close friends because she's not like other girls. Like, I don't know. Like, it was very, like, typical strong female character core, in the sense that, like, she couldn't have any feminine qualities without them being, like, seen as weaknesses, and there weren't really any women in the book that had feminine qualities that didn't get killed. They were shown as being weak, and I don't like that in books. I think that that's, like, kind of, it's just cheap. It feels cheap to me and not interesting. I didn't love the main character. I thought that she was kind of boring and one-dimensional, and then the romantic arc, which is, like, a big part of it, was kind of mid. I didn't really feel any sort of feelings for them as a couple. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. I read it, you know, it's big. I could have put it down. I enjoyed it. I read it. But it didn't grab me. And so 3.25 stars, it was a book. Will I read the sequel? Probably not. My next book was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. It's my first Naomi Novik book. I picked it up because I used to work at Barnes & Noble, and so it was one of those books that I would see all the time, you know, and that I would be like, ooh, I should read that. It's, you know, dark academia fantasy. I don't really fully understand why it wasn't put in YA, like why it wasn't categorized that way, because it is about high schoolers, and I didn't feel that anything in it was particularly overly dark or explicit, that it couldn't have been YA, that it needed to be, like, adult fantasy. I think if it had been YA, I might have liked it more, because it felt a lot younger than I was expecting it to be. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I think it should have been a YA book, but it was just regular fantasy, and that was weird to me. I gave it 3.5 stars. There were times where the writing style to me felt, like, strange in a way that I can't fully, like, explain. There's a Series of Unfortunate Events book where he talks about that feeling, I think it's the first book, where basically Klaus is reading a book, and it's like, and he read the sentence, he was so tired that he read the sentence over and over again, and he read the sentence over and over again, he read the sentence over and over again. Like, that's, like, the quote. I don't know, I'll show it here if I can find it, but anyway, that quote is how I felt sometimes when I was reading A Deadly Education, but I wasn't tired. Like, it wasn't because I was tired, it was just because I would get through the sentence or the paragraph and I'd be like, what? Like, it felt like I had just checked out. like while I was reading. Like I read the whole thing, but it meant nothing to my head. And so then I would have to read it again and I'd still be like, huh? Like what? And there were so many times in the book where that's how I felt, that it was just like there was explanation or like maybe like info dumping, but it just didn't make sense. It was just the way that sentences were formed was confusing to me. And maybe it was just the way that I read it at the time, but something about the writing style was weird. I thought it was fun. I liked the characters. I didn't like the main character at the beginning. At times she felt very like just complainy. Like it was like everything was an issue for this girl. And she was constantly talking about like not liking the people around her and being in a bad mood. And I was like, maybe you don't have friends because you're always in a bad mood. Around the middle of the book, I started to feel for her more. But yeah, I really liked Orion. And because I really liked Orion, I might read the next book in the series. But overall, 3.5 stars. I'll say she cute, she fun. It wasn't my favorite, but maybe now that I'm like used to the writing style, I'll like the second book more. I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting story. It's, oh, the spiel. I keep on forgetting to do the spiel. God. Basically, Galadriel is like the girl in the school who nobody likes. She's very like goth coded. I don't know, not goth, but she's like, you know, the girl that's always wearing black, that's sitting in the back of the classroom and nobody talks to her and she doesn't talk to anybody. She's always in a bad mood, but people think she's like evil, like she gives bad vibes, but she's not. On the other side, there's Orion, and he's kind of the golden boy. He's very popular, and he's always saving people's lives because at this magic school that they go to, and this is why I thought it should have been YA, they go to a like Harry Potter-esque magic school, but there's no teachers. And that's explained, but it didn't make sense to me. But anyway, there's no teachers. It's just the school, and the school is magical and constantly like moving and shifting. And there's magic monsters. And the magic monsters like eat you if you're magical. And they go to the school because it's easier to eat like magic children than it is to eat magic adults. So anyway, a certain number of kids always get eaten by magic monsters every year, but Orion has been saving a lot of kids because he's like the hero. And that has caused problems amongst the school. There's more monsters now. They're all super hungry. They're gonna eat all the seniors, blah, blah, blah. Orion and Galadriel have to figure out how to like fix that. There's this fake dating arc, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, that's A Deadly Education, and that's where I put it. The next book I read, I actually have the physical copy within distance of me. Here we go. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This was fantastic, you guys. I don't know what to tell you. If you're here, you've heard of The Cruel Prince probably, but this is a YA fantasy. It's about a young girl named Jude. Young girl, she's 17, I don't know, young woman named Jude. She's a human girl who lives in fairyland. Elfame, I think is how it's called. I'm gonna show you a map. I love a map in a book, don't you? Okay, look at that. Do you see that? Gorgeous, stunning. Anyway, she lives here. She's lived here since she was a child, since being essentially kidnapped with her two sisters by her half-sister Vivi's father. That's not a spoiler, that's the prologue of the book. But we go through the story of Jude, and basically a lot of people will give this kind of like a lower rating because they're expecting it to be more romantic-y than fantasy, but it's more fantasy than focused on the romance. But basically Jude is 17 and she's trying to figure out her place in this world as a non-magical person. She wants to fit in but she doesn't, and she's bullied by the fairies that are in her class at school, and she's got an enemies to lovers situation with one of the princes, and it's a fun tale. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was great. I had a great time. 10 out of 10 would recommend is where I'm gonna put it, because I don't think I would read it again unless I well, maybe I would read it again, but I feel like there are more fairy tales type stories out there. Like, I'm not big on rereading books. It's rare that I want to reread a book, and because I'm just going through this trilogy back to back to back, I don't feel the need to reread it, so I'm gonna put it in 10 out of 10 would recommend instead of will read again. 4.5 stars, 10 out of 10 would recommend. Next I read The Wicked King. Here we go. It's the sequel to The Cruel Prince. I won't give you much of a spiel because it would involve spoilering Cruel Prince, but basically it's the sequel. We pick up where the last book left off. There's a king and there's water, as you can see on the cover. But yeah, I'm not going to tell you much more about it. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't love it as much as I loved Cruel Prince. Do with that what you will. I'm still going to put it in 10 out of 10 would recommend, because I recommend the whole series, so you should read all 3. And that's coming from someone who hasn't finished the 3rd book. But yeah, that's how I feel about that. My phone ran out of storage, and so I had to, it stopped recording. If it's there, if my footage is there, then that's awesome. If not, then alas. Final book. I'm not gonna grab it because I don't have the physical copy is right over there behind you. And I'm not gonna reach over you to grab it. But anyway, the last book, here it is Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket, and I think I spent a long time talking about this without being actually recorded, so I'm gonna try to get it short and sweet. Basically, Lemony Snicket is the pen name for Daniel Handler, and Daniel Handler is the author of the Series of Unfortunate Events, which is a fantastic book series, and I highly recommend it to anyone of any age. That book series is authored as Lemony Snicket, again, the pen name, but Lemony Snicket is also like a character of his own. He's got a very particular voice and a particular way of telling stories that I find endearing and quirky and fun. And this book, Poison for Breakfast, is unrelated to the Series of Unfortunate Events outside of the fact that it's authored also by Lemony Snicket, and it is told sort of as it's first person. He tells you the story of the day that he ate poison for breakfast, and you go through that day with him, and it's fantastic. It's kind of a murder mystery. He's eaten poison and he's gonna die, and he has to figure out how this happened to him and how to cure it. But it's also a book, to quote him, about bewilderment and philosophy. And so that's essentially what the story is really about, is sort of just a philosophical way of looking at kind of mundane things in life. I'm losing my voice as we speak, but I thought it was fantastic. I read it in 3 days. I gave it 5 stars, and I'm gonna say I will be reading it again because, yeah, it's a fun, easy read, and it's also just truly so enjoyable. And that's all I read in 2024. I hope that this continued recording. Goodbye. Okay, so, hi. Okay. I have to download an app. I'm trying to figure out how to do this, so excuse the confusion. It seems like it's working. Oh my god, slay. Okay. I think I figured it out. Oh my god.